So you have the globe in your hand, and Queens you can find on it. You're only going to Manhattan, right? Or
Yes,
somewhere
Manhattan,
like that.
yes.
Okay, so stay with us.
All right.
You're leaving us in very good hands, but you've made it impossible for anyone to follow in your shoes.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. Can you take that back so we don't drop it? Would you like your notes?
You want to read it?
No, it's okay. I can. Well, good afternoon. It's certainly an honor for me to be able to give this keynote speech, but it's also a daunting task. Given the remarkable speeches we've had all day, given the remarkable people we've seen, and given that generous introduction. So, I just want to say that I couldn't have had a better introduction than the one that Mark gave, because I want to take the opportunity to reflect on the last 11 and a half years. There's going to be no suspense in my talk. I'm telling you my basic theme there, creative preparedness. Mark already set the stage for that. And I'll talk about how important it is to have a kind of preparedness and then an openness to new ideas. That we need to make sure that we look at situations in totally new ways to try to see things in a different light. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And if I can click this right, I want to start at the end of the story for me. And if you can read that, that's a picture that appeared in the New York Times, and that's what the New York Times said in October 27. So we can start with a celebration, a pat on the back to Queens College. The Times recognized what we all know about this college. We were ranked number 2 by the Washington Monthly. Now, that's worth applauding. And what did this mean? It meant that we provided exceptional education at a modest price. We've contributed to the public good in social mobility. We're doing what higher education should do, allow people to move up and achieve the American dream. We're doing research, producing PhDs, and we're providing service. And what does this mean? It means that we're all working together. And that's part of the theme I want to emphasize today. You can have a leader, but if you don't have followers, there is no leader. And so the important thing always is that a leader makes sure it's possible for us all to work together. We also were second in another very important college ranking, the Princeton Review. And notice what it says. We're ranked second for lots of race-class interaction. We had been 4th the year before and 11th before that. And here's where I need to say thank you, thank you, thank you to Cyril, the Center for Ethnic, Racial, and Religious Understanding. It's because of work by the students here and the faculty and Mark Rosenblum and all that we achieved this ranking, and you'll see in a moment why I think that is so very, very important for what Queens College is. Now, we didn't get to the point that I'm celebrating, the point the Times celebrated, the point the Princeton Review celebrated by accident. It took everyone. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village. It takes everyone working together if we're going to have a successful college or university. And also, as I want to point out, the way we succeed is by taking advantage of opportunities we couldn't even know are coming our way. And therefore, I love the quote by Louis Pasteur, "Chance favors a prepared mind." Now, where does this all start for me? I'm a champion of the liberal arts. You may think this is a diversion from the talk, but it's not at all. If one is going to be prepared for life, prepared for leadership, prepared for innovative leadership, it starts with the kind of education that we provide at Queens College to our undergraduates. It's the kind of education that I was fortunate to have in my own background. You start with conversations with geniuses. For me, it started with Plato and Aristotle, and with Hume, and with Galileo. And as Newton said, Sir Isaac Newton said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. The liberal arts education gives us the background so we don't reinvent the wheel, we build on the accomplishments that people have already performed. And we develop habits of the mind. One of the things that's most important, and I love to teach freshmen for this reason, is we all come with many closed mind views. We come because we have been taught and learned certain things, and what a liberal arts education does is help us to question those assumptions, to look at things in new ways. It also helps us to develop habits of the heart. This college, since its beginning, has emphasized service. And when our students do service, and we're emphasizing that more and more today, what it does also is helps us to learn compassion, to learn what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes, and thoughtfulness. So, the liberal arts education is the basis for preparation, for the creative preparation I'm talking about. But for me, it was only the beginning, because, as you heard from Mark, after the education I had as a liberal arts student in undergraduate work, I went on to graduate school, was a faculty member, a scholar, a department chair, a provost, a vice chancellor, and the CEO of a 21st Century Bricks and Click campus. All that, it seems to me, is important if you're going to be an innovator. You must know the industry you're working in this case, higher education. You need to be a student of higher education. When you're trying to understand something, it's often very helpful to find an analogy. Something you're trying to talk about is like. There are lots of different analogies that are given for what it is to be a leader of a university or college. It might be the CEO of a corporation, or it might be the mayor of a city. But I love the analogy of an orchestra leader. Because when you come to a college or a university, you have all these different sections, the oboe section, the violin section. In our case, the various departments, the history department. You have financial aid. You have every section, and your job is to try to make every section be the best it can be. But it's not enough to be the best you can be. It must be the best you can be for the organization you're a part of. For example, we've made tremendous progress with the Kupferberg Center for the Arts that I'll talk about in a moment. We're sitting in the middle of it. What we asked is, how can we be the best performing arts center for Queens College and the Borough of Queens, not how can we be the best arts center, period. And so, you try to make the sections be the best they can be, and then you have to make sure they're playing the same tune, they're on the same page, and they're working in sync. So, that's the analogy I like for what it is you're faced with if you take a job such as I did here some 12 years ago as a college president. Now, the most difficult thing for any leader, but certainly for someone leading an institution like this, is you have to live in two worlds. You have to live in the world that is, and you have to be able to navigate it well. You have to have your eyes wide open, face all the challenges, all the issues. But you also have to live in the world that can be. Both worlds are required. You know, you heard that I was the Dean of Arts and Sciences at the University of Kansas a number of years ago. When I went there, just as when I came here, I read as much as I could about Kansas so I would know. And one of the things I read that really impressed me was a report by a reporter from the East here who came out to pioneering Kansas. And he was startled because everyone he talked to said they were living in such a wonderful place. That the best place to live was this little town in Kansas. So he went to visit these towns. And they had dirt roads, dusty. They had a little one-room schoolhouse that was not much to speak about. The economy wasn't going well. They hadn't had rain, it was drought. So why did they say this was such a great place to live? It's because they were looking at what can be. They all knew they were going to pave those streets. They were, in fact, going to have a college in their town. And they were going to be a place that would draw people from all over because of the economic development that's possible. So, just as those Kansans, a leader must live in both worlds. What is, being fully aware of that, but also what can be. So, I want to just take us back, as Mark did, to some of the things that were the case, that is, back in 2002. This institution had gone through some very rough times. Whenever a president is asked to leave, that's a rough time. And that's what had happened. You also heard we were just following 9/11. Also, a prevalent attitude here was one of defeatism and low expectations. One of the first things I heard that made me really stand and pay attention was someone said, well, look, you can't do that. This is just Queens. What do you mean, just Queens? Or I remember going to the advising office, and they were saying, well, you know, we ask our students to take a very small load. Our students can't really handle a full 12 or 15-hour schedule. The bigotry of low expectations. Faculty and staff were dispirited. There hadn't been much hiring of faculty for a long time. This was seen as a commuter campus by the students, certainly. Just take a class, get back on the bus, go home, do a part-time job. That's college. And major construction projects were on hold. Our most important classroom building, Powdermaker Hall, was simply going nowhere. It was a construction site. Our social science and education faculty were in World War II vintage temporary quarters, and there was a lawsuit preventing any movement forward. So, there were lots of other things going on, but I just wanted to emphasize how a leader has to work in the world that is, face reality of the problems, and then a world that can be. So, I looked at Queens and I said, this is what we can be. We can be a national model for helping students achieve upward mobility and the American dream. And we can be a national model for turning diversity, that is multiculturalism, multilingual, multiracial, multireligious assets into strength. That's what we can be. Now, if those pioneers in Kansas had said they're going to be Wall Street of the world in a few years, we would say that's simply a pipe dream. That's simply pie in the sky. So one has to make sure, if you're talking about what can be, it's realistic. And so one has to look at what do you have to work on? What are the building blocks that make it possible to achieve what you say can be? And this is where the Queens I inherited is rich. You know our mission. We were the College of the Future in 1937. That's what we were called. And we were going to make certain that we provided an education to students in Queens that was affordable, a world-class education that would give them a chance to achieve the American dream. And we had a motto given to us by the first president, Paul Clapper: we learn that we may serve. And look at our students. There's not a college or university in the world, certainly in the U.S., who wouldn't really die for what we have. The diversity, 150 different countries, 90 different languages represented here. And since the beginning of Queens, and this is the benefit of the founders of Queens, the first president, we've hired faculty well, and when you have good faculty, they hire other faculty well. And then when I came here, I read a book that I thought set the tone for what we could do in the next decade. It's a book by a former anthropology professor at Queens, Roger Sanchek, called The Future of Us All. And what it talks about is how, given immigration laws in the 70s and 80s, Queens, as the portal for immigration, has become the way the world will be in the future. So there's not a better place to be than the county of Queens. Now, how are we going to get there from what is to what can be? Well, as I said, we build on the institution's strength. We have to create a consensus on the vision and a strategic plan. And those of you who are here remember we had endless meetings on that to try to come together. Just as I said, you need that if you're looking at us as an orchestra. We had to establish coalitions and partnerships. It takes a long time to build the kind of allegiance you need to do this. And whenever you see there are people who believe we can do better, you must try to encourage them as much as possible. But most important, and this is the creative part of leadership, you have to know that serendipity is your friend. Most of the things we did, we couldn't have said in 2002 we'll do because we didn't know what opportunities or impediments would lie before us. Let me just quickly give you some examples. I talked about how we have to look at what is and what can be. One of the impediments here was this place looked really tired and worn. It wasn't a place, if you brought your parents here, you would be proud of. We had to change that. We also were at a time when the chancellor of this university set as a goal hiring new faculty. So we took full advantage of that, and our search teams on the various departments did a superb job. And so we could move from a faculty that was dispirited to a faculty that was live and excited, because one of the best ways to get everyone excited, those who are here and those who are new, is to bring new faculty, new colleagues into the campus. And then I'll never forget the conversations that Mark Rosenblum and I had early on in my presidency. He was dealing with very controversial issues. And he said, am I okay as president with him taking on these challenges, working on the difficult choices of the Middle East? And I said, yes. This is an example of serendipity. It came our way. This was someone who wanted to do better. And we said, let's write a Ford grant, which we did receive. That changed, that helped us move quantum steps forward toward the dream I put at the beginning of the presentation of being a place that truly celebrates and benefits from our diversity. And you heard earlier from Eva Fernandez, we want very much in a place like this to be able to be a leader in language instruction. We had an opportunity to go to the Mellon Foundation. Eva came with me. And we were able to get a grant in part because, as we were talking, they asked her, what's one of the more difficult things you have at Queens trying to do your research? And she said, well, at Queens, with the student body we have, it's often hard in my linguistic classes to find students who only speak English. Now, you couldn't script that better. We got that grant, and we're making tremendous strides. We've added some very important languages, and we have become a place that really has an international curriculum. And you all know that for years, this college was known for its quality in the arts. We were able to identify someone who loved the arts, who was a graduate of the class of 1942. We gave him a choice when he decided he wanted to give the biggest, by far, gift we had ever received at Queens College. He was a physics major, and he had said that physics provided him his livelihood. he and his brothers developed an engineering company. But, he said, his liberal arts education provided him a quality life, and that he would rather give his money to the arts. And so, if you walked in here today, you see these renovated spaces, you see the renovated Colden and Goldstein Theater. All of those were things that became possible. We had a vision. How would we get there? You take advantage of what comes your way. And by the way, just interesting, an aside, none of these would happen except for special fundraising. And that's what a president is all about these days. You spend most of your time trying to raise funds so that you can do things that in the past might have been paid for by the city or state, but that's not possible today. So what I've told my senior team over the years is we have to live with two words: patience and persistence. You need patience because, as Mark pointed out, especially in Queens, in the large bureaucracy that we live in, you can't get things done fast. So I said Rome was not built in a day. But also, one can't get upset when roadblock after roadblock is put in the way if you know where you want to go and you're going to be determined to get there. And therefore, every day it's important to say the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change those things I can, and to know the difference. And finally, I've always been an admirer of a story, probably not a true story, but a story in mythology of the king of an ancient kingdom who was tongue-tied. He asked his advisors to come and help him to know what to say in times of triumph and in times of tragedy. And they came up with the expression, "This too shall pass." And it is fitting for every occasion, and one has to know when things are going very bad, when it looks as if all the things you're doing are not going anywhere, this too shall pass. When you get the New York Times recognizing what we've done, this too shall pass. So, I want to conclude with my list of what I think are the qualities, the traits of a good leader. I'm not saying I am that leader, I'm just saying these are the things that I think really do make a difference for a leader, certainly in higher education. And the first one is to be calm. I've heard time and again how people have appreciated when things are really going badly, that at the top there's a sense of calmness. Be thoughtful and deliberate. One wants to know that one's going on a certain course because it's been well reasoned, well thought out. One has to be able to articulate that vision in a way that inspires and encourages others to follow. And I think one has to be kind and generous. In fact, I think that has to be one of the motivating forces of higher education, of scholarly work. If you criticize another writer, it should be done in a way that's generous to that person's ideas, certainly critical, but giving that person the benefit of the doubt. And if one can be joyful. Life is short. If one can see that what we're doing is truly a wonderful thing to do, that is contagious. And finally, one has to be flexible with the means, and I was trying to give lots of examples of that. You don't know what's going to happen. You simply have to take advantage of those, but be steadfast with the goals. So I very much appreciate this opportunity to talk with you about my view of leadership, but also to have a chance to look back on what we did in the last 12 years. We've accomplished a lot. I thank every one of you who took part in this, who made it possible for us to move to this point. Now, this is just a certain point along the way. And now it'll be up to this community and the next president to set the new goals. But Queens is in a very good place, and for all that, we can be joyful. Thank you.